and he is directly empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is without change, and he is the incarnation of the Supreme, known as Shaktavasha Avatara. Being a liberated soul and completely learned, he sees all material varieties as meaningless because their basic principle is nescience, ignorance. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The reciters of these prayers are describing the transcendental qualities of Prithu Maharaj. These qualities are summarized in the words Shakshad Bhagavan. This indicates that Maharaj Prithu is directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead and therefore possesses unlimited good qualities. Being an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Maharaj Prithu could not be equaled in his excellent qualities. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is fully equipped with 6 kinds of opulences, and King Prithu was also empowered in such a way that he could display these 6 opulences of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in full. The word kuta sta, meaning without change, is also very significant. There are 2 kinds of living entities, Nitya Mukta and Nitya Bada. A Nitya Mukta never forgets his position as the eternal servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who does not forget his position and knows that he is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord is Nitya Mukta. Such Nitya Mukta living entity represents the Supersoul as his expansion. As stated in the Vedas, Nityo Nityanam, thus the Nitya Mukta living entity, Nitya Mukta means eternally liberated, living entity knows that he is an expansion of the Supreme Nitya, or the eternal Supreme Personality of Godhead. Being in such a position, he sees the material world with a different vision. The living entity, who is Nityabhada, or eternally conditioned, sees the material varieties as being actually different from one another. In this connection, we should remember that the embodiment of the conditioned soul is considered to be like a dress. One may dress in different ways, but a really learned man does not take dresses into consideration, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 5:18. Vidya Vinaya Sampane Brahmane Gavihastini Sunichaiva Swapakecha Pandita Samadarshina. The humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater or outcast. Thus, a learned man does not look upon the dresses that eternally cover the living entity, but sees the pure soul within the varieties of dress and knows very well that the varieties of dress are the creation of nescience, or avidya rachitam, ignorance. Being a Shaktavasha Avatara, empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Prithu Maharaj did not change his spiritual position, and consequently, there was no possibility of his viewing the material world as reality. Okay, now, if we see the world as reality, we get confused. if we understand that everything is temporary in the material world, now we're not confused. Therefore, we do not waste a lot of time running after temporary things. A devotee tries always to be involved with things that are eternal, like Krishna consciousness, eternal. It cannot be destroyed over time. However, becoming a millionaire, other types of positions of power, prestige, and wealth, and so forth, all those things are temporary. Therefore, what is eternal is truth. What is temporary is false. Well, when I mean false, it has some existence, but it's temporary. So therefore, there's sat and asat. Devotees try to always be involved with things that are sat, eternal. And non-devotees are always enamored by things that are temporary. Uh, so the problem is explained here. Vidyavinaya sampane ramni gavi hastini sunichaiva swapakecha pandita samadarshana. The humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater or outcast. Thus, a learned man does not look upon the dresses that externally cover the living at sea, but sees the pure soul within the varieties of dresses and knows very well that the varieties of dress are the creation of nescience or ignorance, avidya rachitam. Being a Shaktavasha avatara, empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Prithu Maharaj did not change his spiritual position, and consequently, there was no possibility of his viewing the material world as reality. Well, that was the vision of Prabhupada also. When he came to the United States from India, and he saw so many people, and especially young people, that were confused and engaged in sense gratification, and they were not necessarily happy. They were miserable. So he could understand how pitiful those people were. And by teaching them to chant Hare Krishna and giving up meat eating, gambling, illicit sex, intoxication, and taking up Krishna consciousness seriously, he transformed the hippies into happies. That's what he said. He changed the hippies into happies, and they became devotees. Although they looked like they were uh, completely hopeless people, not capable of becoming devotees. But Prabhupada did not see that. He did not look at the dress, the material body of the person. He looked at the eternal soul of the person and then tried to recuperate the eternal soul. In other words, elevate the eternal soul to its real position, to be a devotee of the Lord. So therefore it says a humble stage by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater. So being what's called samadarshi, seeing with equal vision, is the real, let's say, way a pundit looks upon the world. Thus, a learned man does not look upon the dresses that externally cover the living entity. So those are bodies, different types of bodies that are considered like dresses, but sees the pure soul within the varieties of dress and knows very well that the varieties of dress are the creation of nescience, avidya rachitam, of ignorance. Being a Shaktavasha avatar, empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Prita Maharaj did not change his spiritual position, and consequently, there was no possibility of his viewing the material world as reality. Yeah, like when you look at movie stars, for example, there's always a lot of infatuation and uh, about the movie stars, and you think, oh, they're so great. They have nice cars. They have looks like they have nice bodies, and they look like they're happy. All that is actually illusory. They're simply human beings, just like anyone else. They're not supermen, but they act like they have some great qualities. One example of that would be Marilyn Monroe. She was a very beautiful lady, and she became very, very popular as a sex symbol. And eventually she became so miserable, she committed suicide. So, therefore, a learned man does not look upon the dresses that externally cover the living entity. Yeah. In other words, the body is not considered with the body, considering the body of a human being. He looks, uh, but he sees the pure soul within the varieties of dress and knows very well that the varieties of dress are the creation of nescience or avidya rachitam, ignorance. Being a Saktavasha avatara empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Prithu Maharaj did not change his spiritual position, and consequently, there was no possibility of his viewing the material world as reality. Okay, so yeah, we shouldn't be fooled by the different tricks of Maya. Yeah, when a devotee doesn't follow Krishna consciousness strictly, Maya plays tricks on him, and he begins to see things differently than a surrendered devotee. Uh, I remember one time, a long time ago, I was in the close to the ocean, and I was looking at the sand, and the sand looked like it was very bright and golden, and I thought it was gold, but it was not gold. It was just sand that was under the sky and uh, was uh, it looked like it was gold, but it was not real gold. But I thought it was gold. So that means that it's very easy for the human being to be fooled by the different situations of the material nature. In the same way, one can be fooled. Like one day, I was walking down the street, and the young lady who was walking uh, also, but she was ahead of me. And it looked like from the back that she was a very young and beautiful lady. But when I walked a little faster and I came up near her and looked at her, she was actually an old lady, but had, really nice hairdo, nice clothing, and uh, perfume and high heels and all that. But actually, when I came closer to her and I passed her, walking, and I looked at her, she's a very old lady. So it's very easy to be uh, fooled by Maya. So, Vidyavinaya Sampane Ramani Gavyastini. Excuse me. Sunichaiva Swapakecha Pandita Samadarshana. The humble stage by virtue of true knowledge. See, now that's a very important statement. By virtue of true knowledge. So, true knowledge is a virtue. What's a virtue? It means a very profound understanding of things. By virtue of pure knowledge, of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater or outcast. So this principle of pandita samadarshana is very important. A devotee doesn't say, oh, well, this one's a low class person and that one is a high class person. This person is black, this person is white. Those are only dresses of people. But the real person is the eternal soul. You might have different colors, might have different language, might have different this or that, but they are all living entities who are potentially devotees. They're simply temporarily forgotten their relationship with Krishna. But if they come in contact with a genuine devotee and follow the instructions of a devotee, their real identity becomes manifest by engaging in devotional service. Thus, a learned man does not look upon the dresses that externally cover the living entity, but sees the pure soul within the varieties of dress and knows very well that the varieties of dress are the creation of neshans, of vidya rachitam. Neshans also, neshans means ignorance. Being a Saktavisha avatara, empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Prithu Maharaj did not change his spiritual position. And consequently, there was no possibility of his viewing the material world as reality. So when it says he did not change his spiritual position, he continued practicing Krishna consciousness, chanting, dancing, feasting, and regularly hearing Bhagavad Gita spoken, Srimad Bhagavatam, and associating with devotees, eating only prasadam, and so forth. He didn't change his position at all. In the material world, people are always seeking who they are. So therefore, they might change the way they dress. They might change the way they have their hairdo. They might change the car, and they might do other things to give themselves a new persona, a new perception of who they are. But actually, all that is artificial. Just like a woman may be ugly, but after going through the treatment of a, let's say, uh, of a facelift and buying, expensive clothing, having perfume, and putting uh, some different things, onions on her face to make her look younger and more beautiful. All of that is Maya. It's all illusion. It's all temporary. So therefore, there was once a man who was very attracted by a beautiful woman, and he wanted to, have sense gratification with her. So she told him, "Okay, but you have to wait at least a week." He said, "Why is that?" She said, "That's my condition. If you want to be with me, then you have to wait for 1 week." So anyway, he said, "Okay." So during that week, she took a lot of purgatives, and she was throwing up and vomiting. And when the man came back after a week, expecting to engage in sense gratification with the lady, when he looked at her, she looked ugly. Whereas a week before, she looked very beautiful. And then he asked her, he said, "What happened to you?" And she said, "What do you mean, what happened to me?" He said, you look so beautiful a week ago, and now you don't look so good." And she said, "Oh, well, I put my good looking in this bucket. You can go and take a look at it." So, so he looks at the bucket, and it's full of stool and urine and pee and all these different types of horrible things. And she said, "That is my beauty right there." So, so beauty is only skin deep. If you start vomiting and throwing up and so forth, very quickly all that beauty goes away. So she told him, "Oh, this is my beauty in that bucket." So he became very disappointed. He thought that she was a very beautiful woman, but when he came back after a week, uh, she lost her veneer of beauty, and he became confused. So, in the same way, here it says, "Thus a learned man does not look upon the dresses that externally cover the living entity, but sees the pure soul within the varieties of dress, and knows very well that the varieties of dress are the creation of nescience, ignorance, avidya rachitam." Being a Shaktavasha Avatara empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Preeta Maharaj did not change his spiritual position, and consequently, there was no possibility of his viewing the material world as reality. Well, the material world has what you might call temporary reality, but it's not eternal. So, therefore, it is illusory in that sense. Just like I may have a lot of money, but I may make a lot of mistakes and lose all my money, right? That happens to people all the time. So I'm still the same person. I just don't have money anymore. That's no reason to commit suicide. There's no reason to be lamenting because uh, I am not this body and I am not money. I have an eternal spirit soul that cannot die. They cannot be hurt. They cannot disappear. So therefore, we should not be disturbed by the different uh, situations of life. We should know that there will be ups and downs in the material world. However, we should remain steady in our determination to be Krishna conscious. Then we are an actual person. But if we are someone who goes up and down with the different uh, situations of life, then we're not a real person. We are a shadow of a person, not real person. A shadow is something that looks real but is not real. Just like I can put my hand uh, uh, and in such a way that there's a shadow of my hand. And if a person thinks that the shadow is my hand, the shadow of my hand is the real hand, and tries to shake the shadow hand, he realizes that's not the hand. It looks like the hand. It's a shadow of the hand, but the hand is different than the shadow. So that's what's going on in the material world. People don't look at, as it says here, the learned man does not look upon the dresses that externally cover the living entity, but sees the pure soul within the varieties of dress and knows very well that the varieties of dress are the creation of neshness, of vidya rachitam, meaning ignorance. Being a Shaktavasha avatar empowered by the Supreme Personality Godhead, Prithu Maharaj did not change his spiritual position. That means he continued to chant Hare Krishna, he continued to eat prasadam, he continued to avoid the association of unholy people, etc. So our philosophy is no change. And the material world, the philosophy is constant change. But the devote, when you realize, like for example, whenever there's a wedding in amongst Indians, all the women, the old women, the younger women, they all have a facelift with cosmetics and so forth. And when you go to the wedding, they all look very pretty, right? But it's all because of a facelift or cosmetics and lipstick and hairdos and things like that. But after the wedding is over, after a week or two, they look again like they were before, very plain Jane, and no longer having uh, a semblance of being beautiful. Well, uh, that's the truth. Uh, Thus, a learned man does not look upon the dresses that externally cover the living entity, but sees the pure soul within the varieties of dress and knows very well that the varieties of dress are the creation of nescience, of vidya rachitam, illusion. Being a Shaktavish avatar empowered by the Supreme Personality Godhead, Krita Maharaj did not change his spiritual position, and consequently, there was no possibility of his viewing the material world as reality. Just like whenever there's a marriage, all the women have their hair done in a special way. They have some cosmetics put on their face. They have some lipstick. And even though they're old or they're not so beautiful, they look different because of all that attention to artificially make themselves look more pretty or more attractive. Uh, And then after the wedding is all over, a week later, they go back looking like like they did before, just an ordinary person. So we should uh, not be fooled uh, by, just like Prita Maharaj did not change his spiritual position, and consequently, there was no possibility of his viewing the material world as reality. Just because someone gets new clothes, gets a facelift, gets by exercising, seems to have a healthier body or a better looking body or whatever. All that uh, is considered to be illusory. It's not the real person. The real person is the soul, not the different uh, uh, visions of the material body. Okay, so we'll go on now to text 20. This king, being uniquely powerful and heroic, will have no competitor. He will travel around the globe on his victorious chariot, holding his invincible bow in his hand and appearing exactly like the sun, which rotates in its own orbit from the south. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. In this verse, the word yathartha indicates that the sun is not fixed, but is rotating in its orbit, which is set by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita and also in other parts of the Srimad Bhagavatam. In the fifth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is stated that the sun rotates in its own orbit at the rate of 16,000 miles per second. Similarly, Brahma Samhita states, Yasya Gyaya Brahmati Samrita Kala Chakarta. Uh, the sun, okay, Chakarta. The sun rotates in its own orbit according to the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The conclusion is that the sun is not fixed in one place. As far as Prithu Maharaj is concerned, it is indicated that his ruling power would extend all over the world. The Himalaya mountains, from which the sunrise is first seen, are called Udayachala or Udayadri. It is herein indicated that Prithu Maharaj's reign over the world would cover even the Himalaya mountains and extend to the borders of all oceans and seas. In other words, his reign would cover the entire planet. Another significant word in this verse is Naradeva. As described in previous verses, the qualified king, be he King Prithu or any other king who rules over the state as an ideal king, should be understood to be God in human form. According to Vedic culture, the king is honored as the supreme personality of Godhead because he represents Narayana, who also gives protection to the citizens. He is therefore Natha, or the proprietor. Even Sanatan Goswami gave respect to the Nawab Hussein Shah as Nara Deva. Although this Nawab was to rule, although the Nawab was Mohammedan, a king or government head must therefore be so competent to rule over the state that the citizens will worship him as God in human form. That is the perfection stage for the head of any government or state. Well, there were examples in the past of Muslims who were kings, and they were good kings, uh, and they were given all respect. And there were other Muslim kings who were rascals and nonsense people. So, uh, Naradeva, it says here, uh, Naradeva means someone who is like God. Even Sanatan Goswami gave respect to the Nawab Hussein Shah as Naradeva, although the Nawab was a Mohammedan. A king or governmental head must therefore be so competent to rule over the state that the citizens will worship him as God in human form. That is the perfectional stage for the head of any government or state. Well, there were Muslims who were ruling in India. I mean, the Muslims were ruling India for 800 years, and some of the Muslim kings were good, and some of them were bad. So, therefore, says even Sanatan Goswami gave respect to the Nawab Hussein Shah as Nara Deva, although the Nawab was Mohammedan. A king or governmental head must therefore be so competent to rule over the state that the citizens will worship him as God in human form. That is the perfectional stage for the head of any government state, any government or state. Well, yeah, there were Muslim rulers, some Muslim rulers in India that were good. And there were also Muslim rulers that were really bad. So, uh, but in general, the leader of a state is considered as Naradeva, a human being who is like a deva, a demigod. Even though someone may be a Mohammedan, a king or governmental head must therefore be so competent to rule over the state that the citizens will worship him as God in human form. That is the perfectional stage for the head of any government or state. So it doesn't matter whether he's a Hindu or a Muslim, if he's a very good leader and is Samadarshi, he does not see uh, people with prejudice, but he is equally and it sees people equally. That person should be glorified. So a king or governmental head must therefore be so competent to rule over the state that the citizens will worship him as God in human form. That is the perfectional stage for the head of any government or state. Well, there were governing people in India who were Muslims, and the people were satisfied living under the Muslim government. And there were others that were rascals, nonsense. However, here it's saying uh, even Sanatan Goswami gave respect to the Nawab Hussein Shah as Naradeva. Although the Nawab was Mohammedan, a king or governmental head must therefore be so competent to rule over the state that the citizens will worship him as God in human form. That is the perfectional stage for the head of any government or state. Well, yeah, but then there's people like King Venu, who was nonsense. So uh, he was the head of the state, but he was a very sinful person. Actually, real kings are not Johnny come lately, but they are trained from birth to become a king. They're not like dictators that usurp the position of a king. Right from birth, they're trained to be kings, and therefore, uh, people respect them. But if you get some low class person just because she defeats uh, the the ruling the rulers of a country, takes over the country, but is actually a rascal, that means that he's not really a king. He's just a thief. But if a person treats people and sees people uh, as you would call, with equal vision, then he's a bona fide king. He's not prejudicial, and he gives everybody respect according to their position in the society. Okay, text 21. When the king travels all over the world, other kings, as well as the demigods, will offer him all kinds of presentations, meaning it's happening today when one very prominent politician visits another country, and it happens all the time. He's welcomed with gifts, just like even in India, when there are dignitaries that come to uh, the uh, Delhi, uh, to the Red Fort, they're given presents and they're welcome. Other dignitaries from other countries. So that is the normal culture of a kingly state, to be very generous when people come as dignitaries to take their position of power, or they give their credentials in order to be uh, representatives of a country. They're often given gifts by the uh, prevailing state as a token of respect. So when a king travels all over the world, other kings, as well as the demigods, will offer him all kinds of presentations, meaning they give presents to such persons. Their queens will also consider him the original king, who carries in his hands the emblem of club and disc, and will sing of his fame, for he will be as reputable as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay, this was the actual culture in previous time, and to a certain extent, it's still happening today. When a dignitary of another country visits, goes uh, a trajectory of visits to other countries, he's also welcomed with honor. And there's the state that he's visiting, the state people will give him uh, uh, presents and offer him a nice place to stay and give what you would call respect to such people. So a long time ago, one day, our devotees were going to meet a sannyasi devotee, and they were in the airport, nicely dressed, and they had a lot of, they had were ready to honor the sannyasi that was going to come. But in the meantime, there was another group of people who were expecting a dignitary to come, but they had forgotten to bring, presents. When they saw the devotees waiting to welcome a sannyasi, they went and talked to the devotees and said, "Look, you guys uh, have uh, uh, an expectation of a dignitary of your movement that's going to come, and you have presents and other things for him. We have a dignitary that's coming before your dignitary, but we haven't brought any presents or anything. Can you help us?" So the devotee said, "Yeah." So when their dignitary came before the sannyasi, he was met with Harinam Sankirtan, with presents and so forth, and he got the welcome of that's commensurate with being a king. Right? Now, after that, the the people that asked the devotees to help them receive the dignitary, they were so cognizant of the help that the devotees gave that uh, they were government people. They gave later on the governor's welcome to the Hare Krishna dignitary that came. They gave him the full gamut of respect because they were saved by the devotees. I mean, by they were saved by the devotees who helped them receive their dignitary. Right? Okay, so yeah, they did kirtan and they walked with the dignitary and gave him some presents and so forth. So the people that had come without all that paraphernalia, they were so thankful that they organized a welcome of like a king, the devotee that came, right? Or it was actually Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was welcomed by the high dignitaries of that country, and as a what you would call a uh, quid pro quo. Look that up.
Yeah. So
What's that?
it's like you scratch my back, I scratch.
Yeah, exactly. Quid pro quo. Okay, so text number 21. When the king travels all over the world, other kings, as well as the demigods, will offer him all kinds of presentations, all kinds of respect and presents and so forth. Their queens will also consider him the original king who carries in his hands the emblems of club and disc, and will sing of his fame, for he will be as reputable as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay. Yeah, whenever a king, let's say whenever uh, someone like Modi travels to another country, they treat him with a lot of respect and they offer him presents and so forth. And when he in the Red Fort or in Delhi uh, uh, has a meeting with a dignitary from another country, they give a lot of respect to those dignitaries. As far as reputation is concerned, King Prithu is already known as the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The word Adi Rajam means the original king. The original king is Narayana, or Lord Vishnu. People do not know that the original king, or Narayana, is actually the protector of all living entities, as confirmed in the Vedas. Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadati Kaman, Katha Upanishad 2.2.13. Actually, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is maintaining all living entities. The king, or Naradeva, is his representative. His meaning Krishna's, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead's representative. As such, the king's duty is to personally supervise the distribution of wealth for the maintenance of all living entities. If he does so, he will be as reputable as Narayana. As mentioned in this verse, Tad Yasa, Pritha Maharaj was actually carrying with him the reputation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead because he was actually reigning over the world in that capacity. Well, what's interesting here is that uh, it is the king's duty to personally supervise the distribution of wealth for the maintenance of all living entities. That's an important statement. The king shouldn't be a greedy person who wants to have all the wealth for himself, but he should uh, supervise the distribution of wealth for the maintenance of all living entities. All right, well, that's a very good example of the welfare state uh, in in early 1920s, 1928, I think. There was a real severe uh, downturn uh, of the economy, and a lot of people were suffering. And that suffering continued for almost for over 10 years. It only changed when World War II came. But anyway, during that time, before there was no Social Security, all these other welfare programs of the government, or there might have been a few welfare programs, but not much. After the severe downturn of the country, started in 1928 or 29, and it went on right up to World War II. Uh, the there were at that time socialized programs were adopted, whereas before they didn't have those programs. So social what do we call it?
Security.
Yeah,
Social
security programs started. So many programs started to help indigent people. Otherwise, there would have been a revolt. The government would have been overthrown and communism would have taken over. That's how dangerous it was because people were starving. They were selling apples in the street just to uh, uh, have a little money for food. You could buy one apple for 5 cents, right? So there were people, they were hustling other people just to make a living to feed their family. It was a very difficult time in the 1920s. From 1928 to World War II, it looked almost as if the United States was going to become a communist country. And communism began to look very prominent in the United States. The Communist Party became very prominent because they were promising equal They were promising all kinds of welfare programs for the people. So at that time, the American government began to include welfare programs so that the people would not revolt and become communist. The whole idea of Social Security became a reality in the 1930s uh, because so many people were suffering from poverty in the United States. I wasn't born then, but my family, uh, uh, like my father, my mother, my relatives, they went through the 1930s. It was very difficult for them, very, very difficult for everybody. But eventually, uh, what saved the United States was World War II. Then they could, uh, declare an emergency and take over control of the banks and everything during the war. During war, all the liberties of people become frozen, and the government, has complete power. Then after the war, it goes back to the normal situation again, where the people have equal rights and so forth. But oftentimes in wartime, the government, as a necessity, takes control of the banks and the some businesses and so forth. Uh, but after the war, they give it back. Well, not always. In some governments, but in the United States, they'll give back everything that was done in an emergency situation. Okay, so here, text 21, and we'll end up with this. As far as reputation is concerned, King Prithu is already known as the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The word Adi Rajan means the original king. The original king is Narayana, or Lord Vishnu. People do not know that the original king, or Narayana, is actually the protector of all living entities. As confirmed in the Vedas, Eko Bahunam Yo Vidati Kaman, Kathopanishad 2.2.13, actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead is maintaining all living entities. The king, or Naradeva, a human being who is like a deva, a demigod, is his representative. As such, the king's duty is to personally supervise the distribution of wealth for the maintenance of all living entities. Okay, there is the main major argument of Social Security right there. The distribution of wealth for the maintenance of all living entities. That did not exist before World War II. If he does so, he will be as reputable as Narayana. As mentioned in this verse, Tat Yasa, Krita Maharaj was actually carrying with him the reputation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead because he was actually reigning over the world in that capacity. So, if you're going to be have the reputation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then you have to be very generous by helping all the people in the country have at least the minimum necessities to live peacefully. If you cannot do that, then the people are going to revolt. And it did look like in the 1930s, it did look like communism might take over the United States because so many people were suffering due to the economic downturn. However, the United States was saved by World War II. As soon as World War II came, then the government took over all the banks and everything, uh, and they were able to, uh, you know, weather the storm. And then after World War II was over, they went back to the normal way of doing business in the United States, and they avoided a revolution. During that period, in the 1930s, they started welfare programs for the people, whereas before there was no really organized welfare programs for the people. So the Social Security uh, uh, welfare program began, and other types of programs to help the indigent people, the ones that were suffering, and a lot of people were suffering during that period. But so they wouldn't revolt, they started the Social Security program where indigent people could get help directly from the government, uh, and to avoid, being completely forgotten and ignored. So today, the welfare programs in the United States are very, very prominent. Whereas, before the 1930s, there was hardly any type of Social Security protections in the country. Okay, so that's why it says here, and this is our takeaway today, the king or Naradeva, the human being in the form of a deva, is the representative, is Krishna's representative. As such, the king's duty is to personally supervise the distribution of wealth for the maintenance of all living entities. That doesn't only mean human beings, that also means the animals, the trees, etc. He has to personally supervise the distribution of wealth for the maintenance of all living entities. If he does so, he will be as reputable, meaning as famous, as Narayana, the Supreme Personality Godhead. As mentioned in this verse, Tad Yasa, Prita Maharaj was actually carrying with him the reputation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead because he was actually reigning over the world in that capacity. What is that capacity? He personally supervised the distribution of wealth for the maintenance of all living entities in his kingdom. Hare Krishna. Okay, that is our takeaway today. Actually, the Supreme Personality Godhead is maintaining all living entities. The king, or Naradeva, is his representative. As such, the king's duty is to personally supervise the distribution of wealth for the maintenance of all living entities. If he does so, he will be as reputable, meaning as famous, as Narayana. As mentioned in this verse, Tad Yasa, Prithu Maharaj was actually carrying with him the reputation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead because he was actually reigning over the world in that capacity. So, yeah, before uh, the revolution in Europe took place, the monarchs were very greedy and people were suffering. And at one time in France, they revolted and they started killing all the noble people. They used what's called a guillotine. This very, very sharp weapon that is put high up, and then they let it fall down, and it cuts off the head of a person immediately. So they revolted and they started killing all the uh, rich people and the government people because the common people were suffering and the rich people were partying. And eventually, the tolerance of the people finished, and they decided to kill all the nobles and have an more of an equitable uh, governance in which there would be financial help for the people who are less fortunate. Yeah. So whenever there's bad, what you would call uh, organization in a country, and many people are suffering from hunger and so forth, the people will revolt and they'll kill the so-called rulers of the country and hopefully put in a new set of rulers that are going to act in more equitable way, helping the people to have a decent life. Okay, well, thank you very much. We'll stop there now. Please, my dear devotees, have a very good day. Chant Hare Krishna and be happy and have the mercy of Krishna always. Our real purpose in life is to please Krishna by practicing Krishna consciousness seriously. Not only we please Krishna, then we please everybody, because a good devotee is friends to everyone and is always respected because of their generosity, their humility, and their knowledgeable way of doing things. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna. Hare Rama, Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna. Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna. Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna. Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama Rama, Rama Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama Rama, Rama Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama Rama, Rama Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Hare Rama, Rama Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna. Hare Hare, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Rama Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Hare Hare, Rama Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama.